All right, welcome everyone to the sixth event in the 2021 Music Matters series. This is the home lecture and performance series of the Popular Music Sound and Media Culture's BA, MA, and PhD program in the Arts, Culture, and Media Department at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. My name is Dr. Chris Tonelli. Our talk today will be about 45 minutes, and then we'll have about the same amount of time for questions. And so during the question period, you can use the raise hand function if you'd like to ask a question, or you can post your question in the chat. I'm one of 6 music professors in our program, and I'm going to give the floor now to my colleague, Dr. Peter Verstrata, who's going to introduce our speaker for today.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, I'm extremely happy to finally meet Cathy van Eck for the first time. I mean, I have been in touch with her through Facebook. I know her from her book. Since her PhD, I've been following her, so I'm really delighted to give the floor to her. Just a little note on her, maybe. Cathy van Eck is a composer, a sound artist, a researcher in sound arts, and I really like, that you have all of that together. You are a scholar, and at the same time you're also doing art yourself, and thinking through your work. You focus, or she focuses on composing relationships between everyday objects and actions, human performance, and usually movements and gestures, and sound. Her many sound work, and installations capture everyday sonic realities that could be bird sounds in a forest, for instance, and also the transformations that usually are done electroacoustically through recording. But she also explores the role of narration. She often works with loudspeakers, like, for instance, acoustic feedback, microphones, sensors, MP3s, live electronics. But she often starts from just the resonant materiality of things themselves, like chairs, music stands, sheet music, the objects in their designated acoustic spaces that transform sonically through, for instance, movement. And that's why she also collaborates regularly with theater directors and choreographers, which makes her work interdisciplinary, overlapping with performance art, hence what she calls a performative sound art. She teaches at the Department for Sound Arts of the University of Arts in Bern in Switzerland. And in her PhD research, which was titled Between Air and Electricity in 2013, she investigated the use of microphones and loudspeakers as musical instruments. And that then was turned into that wonderful book that was published in 2017. We should check if that's in the library, and if not, then we should order it immediately under the title Between Air and Electricity, Microphones and Loudspeakers as Musical Instruments. Okay, now I'll leave the floor to you, Cathy.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I can add something about the book, because it's now also available as an open access PDF. So if you go to the website microphonesandloudspeakers.com, you will find a link. And if you click on that, you can, I'm not sure if it might be not the complete PDF, but there you can just download the separate chapters. But if you Google it, PDF, then you will find a legal way to download it. Probably also some illegal ways, but there is also a legal way to download. It's really open access. Yeah, so I focused a lot on microphones and loudspeakers during the last years, and today I will talk about some works where that is still an aspect, but also during the last years, I went more and more into working with gestures and connecting everyday actions to sound, and look at what can I do with that, and also to look at what are actions I want to make music with, but not necessarily actions which we do make music with, and what this tension between these actions having another purpose than to make music and making music with them. That's one of the things I'm really interested in at the moment. My current research is also on gestures, sensors, and sounds. So that's on combining mainly, electronic sounds. I always say I see these electronic sounds very broad. It's every sound which can sound through a loudspeaker. So it could be also a recording of a very acoustic event, but the moment it comes through a loudspeaker, I can, of course, it becomes something different. So from there on, that are the sounds I'm interested in. And then the gestures, well, that's things done by performers with their bodies. And in between are the sensors, which are making from this complicated physical world of gestures going to a very small part of the sensor, which is just taking one aspect of that world, physical world, making it an electric current and sending that again to the computer, who then makes a sound, and then it goes out again into the complicated physical world. So that's what I'm busy with now. Today I take 3 works of myself as an example of what I'm interested in. My own work is much more chaotic, I would say, than when I do. That's also why I like to divide it. When I write about something, like in the book, it's really well, perhaps in the introduction there are a few words on my own work, but otherwise not, because I really like to focus on the work by others, and it's much easier for me to analyze what is happening. When I'm talking about my own work, it's much more I need some space where I'm like, well, this is not a conscious decision, like it should be like this and this and this, or I can't look at just one single aspect. So I have 3 works which I'm going to talk about, and we will look at different aspects which I try to make with certain actions. And the first work to start with is the work Empty Chairs. Was developed in 2018. And this was a work where, which started, as very often in my work, it starts with an idea I have, and I like to keep the ideas for a very long time in my head. So I have the idea, I want to do something with chairs. And when I started then to work on the piece, I start with notating down ideas on that, but often I don't do anything with it for quite some months. Like I write down some ideas, and then it lies there again and then again. And at a certain moment, in this case, it was a residency at III in The Hague, I really start to work on it. So when I started to work on this piece, I knew I want to do a piece for chairs, because I like how chairs are objects which are, well, if you put 2 chairs in a space, depending on how they are placed, you get an impression of what could happen in that space. If they're positioned next to each other, it's completely something different than when they're placed in opposite of each other. If they're placed in different corners, it's again something different. And so when I started to work on this, I thought it was going to be for 2 chairs. I tried to work with 2 chairs, but pretty soon I realized that was a mistake, because with 2 chairs, it was too much like me against the chairs, and I realized the chairs have to be a group and not just a duo. So they had to be a group, so it would be clear that I was just putting the chairs in position, but I'm really a kind of not a person who is having any. I'm quite a I'm serving them at that moment. I'm serving the chairs and putting them in right positions. And just at the very end, I slowly become someone who might become a performer. And one of the things which was very important, what you see also in this picture, you should tell me, by the way, if there's something you don't see or you don't hear in what I'm talking about, then I'm very happy to be interrupted by you. What you see on this picture is the setup. So there's a microphone, and there are 3 chairs. On each chair there's a loudspeaker, and usually I use chairs which are there already, where the place where I perform is, because it would be just a huge setup to take 3 chairs with me every time. What you don't see are the sensors I use, and the sensors I use are very simple mobile phones, which nowadays, if you use a very old mobile phone, these ones are from 2011, which is ancient for mobile phones. And but they have a super good sensor system which functions wirelessly, and it has been put research in by Apple for millions dollars, and so they function very good, and people don't want to have them anymore, so they are very cheap. So I use them because it's a very stable sensor system, and they're underneath the chair. And then during the piece, I try to use these different kind of positions of the chairs to play different sounds. So what happens in the very beginning is that I place the chairs and in various positions on stage. I just walk on stage with a chair. I place it there, and then the chair is there on stage. What the audience doesn't know is that the moment I take the chair, the phone says to the computer, the chair is moving now. And when I put it back again, the phone says to the computer, the chair's not moving anymore. Evidently, the phone doesn't say it like that, but that's what the sensors send as an information to the computer. And what I programmed then in the computer, in this case, it's a patch for people who know something. I have no idea, by the way. So the exact knowledge of I'm not going to go very technically, but this is a technical information. In this case, it's a patch in Max MSP music software to program exactly these kinds of relationships. So the computer knows, because I've programmed it that way, the moment that I take up the chair, the sensor says, computer, chair is moving, that the computer has to start to record the sound, which is happening at that moment in the room. And the moment I put it down again, the computer gets the message of the sensor, the chair is not moving anymore. And the computer knows, stop recording this sound and start to play the recording in irregular intervals, which I also have programmed. So it's not a simple loop, but that's less important. The principle, what is important is like there's a record sound, put the chair back. So I can play then a kind of what you would usually call a kind of sampling machine, but a very uncomfortable sample machine, because I have to carry chairs around. Instead of, normally you would have a sampler controller in front of you and do like this with a knob. This time it's really carrying chairs around. So I, and that's how the piece then starts. I'm carrying a chair, and there's not so much sound to record, because usually this piece is done during a concert and people are silent because they think, oh, this is a performance and we have to be silent. So everybody's silent except me, because I'm carrying the chair. And I always, one of the things I do is when I prepare this performance is to take different shoes with me. So I'm sure that I can test some shoes on the floor and be sure that they make some noise. So I record then the noisy part of me walking and put it on the floor, and then you hear my footsteps through the chair. By placing the chairs in different positions, it gets more and more footsteps. So what I'm looking for in this case, it's an action, which is placing chairs, and connecting it with an action, which is an electronic music action, which is playing samples, recording samples and playing them again, which is very common, but doing them with a kind of wrong interface, or much an interface which makes it actually very difficult to really control what you're doing. You would normally, if you record a sample live on stage, you would make sure like, oh, let's be sure that it sounds nice at this moment. In my case, I have to walk with the chair at the same moment, and that gives a lot of constraints. Like I know, oh, this chair, I want to place it at the other side of the stage, so I'm busy with that, and I'm not only busy with making music. During the piece, there are done different phases of how I, what my relationship is to the chair, and also how I position the chairs, and also what kind of sound they make due to me doing something with them. The overall development could be seen as it starts with these sounds which are in the space, which slowly are recorded, to the sounds, the chairs making sounds themselves, which are chair sounds. And then it slowly evolves till the very end, where the chairs are really able to be in touch with the microphone, because the microphone is the one which makes all the recordings. In the beginning, when I take up a chair, it's this microphone which makes the recordings. I'll show you some examples of what is happening exactly. So here, this is one of the positions of here I put them very clear in a row. This is a circle position. Actually, this is from because when I see this picture, I immediately know, oh, this can never happen in the piece, because I sit down at the very end and I only sit down moving the chair to the microphone. This is a picture made during a rehearsal version. So that's because the sitting down is something I do at the very, very end of the piece. This is a part, and we will later on see also some videos of this, where I kind of interview the chairs. So they're finally, before they have made some sounds by their own, but now they're finally listened to, and I become here. This is the part where I finally become also a performer myself, where I'm not only carrying the chairs around, but I take the microphone and I go to the chairs. I stand in the middle. I put them in a circle, which is also chairs standing in a circle. It's clear that something very different is going to happen than a chair standing in a row. So this was also one of the moments where, when I was trying out stuff with chairs, I realized two is not enough, because the difference between a row and two chairs opposite to each other and a circle, it's very nice to have, and I want to have that possibility in the piece. So here they are in a circle, and I have the microphone, and I can go to the loudspeaker, and every time I'm close enough to the loudspeaker, you will hear ping, which is done with the computer just listens, is the microphone hearing enough, and then it plays a ping through the loudspeaker. So I will play you a part of the beginning, which is very the whole video is a bit how do you say the beginning is every day, like as if I'm putting stuff in place, and it should be like that. Also, some people also told me, like, after performing, like, oh, in the beginning I thought the piece hadn't started yet, and I really like that comment, because that's really the feeling I want the people to have, like, oh, she's just placing the chairs there, and then it just goes on a bit too long, like, oh, she's still, and then you start to hear the footsteps, which are often quite soft. I've no idea how you will hear this through the it might be a bit too much for the footsteps to be also video streamed now live, but we will try. Yeah, so this is a part of the beginning of the piece, and the whole surrounding is a bit every day, because there was, at the same time, you see already in the background a computer which is not mine. I would never place it, or that computer is mine actually, but there are other drums on stage, etc., and you will see too much which is visible. I normally prefer a somewhat emptier stage, but I don't have a video of an emptier stage, so we are gonna watch this one. So what you might have heard during the video is that every time I pick up a chair, everything becomes empty again. So every time I pick it up, everything is empty again, and then when I put it down, it continues. So it's kind of clear. I don't think the audience really gets it, what is exactly happening with she's recording every time she picks up the chair. But what the audience does get is like she's recording the sound which is there, because they hear like it sounds a bit similar. Well, in this video, not really, I guess on the live video stream, but it sounds, you hear like, oh, the footsteps are a bit similar. And they also realize she can stop it again by picking up a chair and putting it down again. So there's some kind of I would say there's some kind of power in the setup of I'm in control at that moment. I'm the one who is deciding, and that's also my role, is looking at the chairs. I also take often quite big pauses where I just listen, like what is happening, and it becomes fuller and fuller because there are more and more samples added to the setup. Then the next part here, what I did is here the chairs are slowly starting to get a bit of sound of their own, so I can shove them. And of course, in this case, it doesn't matter what I would do with them. If I would pick them up just the same as before, it would still sound. So this is one of the ways where I want to make a difference between the technology triggering something and the action, which seems to be important to be connected in a certain way to the sound. Because if I would be the person who would have a controller, I would still use the same kind of, it's just an on and off knob. It would be enough to, okay, the sample is going to sound. And instead of recording something, I now just play back a sample I recorded before, even. So long before the performance, I went in the studio here, actually in the place where I'm now, because I'm at my school. And there I recorded shoving chairs, shoving them, and make. And I also decided when I was recording that I need also some kind of different shoving chair sound. So I also shoved other objects. I had object with me. I processed them and I said like, okay, these are the kind of what I imagine to be good shoving chair sounds. And that's what the second part is about, is I'm shoving them and triggering these different movements, and they're slowly, they're saying something themselves, so to say. They start to speak something themselves. In chair sounds, and a chair sound, chairs don't have much sounds to sound, so their chair sound is shoving.
We actually can't hear the sound when you mute.
Okay, till there. So you don't hear any sound when I'm muted?
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay, so then it's taking it's not taking my wait, I see why. Yeah, okay. Think I can oh no, it's the okay. Anyway, I might have I think the security is not on for the microphone, and you are now hearing it just to the doesn't matter. I will see if I can do something for it, and otherwise that's just how it is, because I think I can't really change that now. No, it gives it me just as an option, but not as something I can do. Anyway, you might hear a bit of it, and the shoving sounds, and there's also the moment where I change the chair like this, and then there it's out, so it can start to make sounds itself, and the chairs slowly develop then during the piece as more and more someone who can chairs which can do something, which can communicate with each other there. And when I developed the piece, I thought well, there was the microphone all the time also in the room, and I first of all thought I was going to say something in the microphone, and say something important, of course, or it was going to be about speeches. So I did a lot of, when I developed the piece, I was standing in front of the microphone, and I had positioned the chairs in front of me, and I was like, so now I'm going to say something. And I had also all kinds of texts, because one of the things what the piece for me was a starting point was like, there are these empty chairs, and what are empty chairs in our lives, and what does an empty chair mean? So I felt like, oh, you could have all kind of associations, very dramatic ones, etc. But during developing the piece, every time I was in front of that microphone, I realized I can't find a text for this. And I also realized, no, that's just what this should be about, is that there shouldn't be real words for this, because it's about the situation of the chairs and the associations we have with this, and the sonic content, which can give this a content which is not capable to be captured with words. So I realized that's what I'm looking for. So I shouldn't give them any words at all. I can use like kind of how they would speak with each other. So there are parts where they're really put in positions where they're, for example, two chairs are together and then the other chair is alone. So I use communication strategies we know from talking, like if you would talk together, the chairs might be positioned like that, or if you would not want to talk with someone, you would perhaps even turn your chair a bit like that, and that's what's happening in the piece. But it's never done with any words, so that I decided I just need sounds which are not related to words. So all the words, the longer I worked on the piece, the less words there were. Still, there was nothing left. I quickly show you a part of that. So here they slowly get into a circle, and I get the microphone for the first and the last time in the piece. Actually, I get the microphone. I start the talking part, and then at the very end, there is a part where they finally are in contact, the chairs, with the microphone, and they start the acoustic feedback loop. And that's also the moment that I'm finally sitting down on the chair, and I shove the chair slowly forwards. That was also a part where in the beginning I thought I was gonna do all kind of, well, not acrobatic stuff, because I'm not acrobatic, but I thought I would at least stand on a chair and step from one chair to the other. But there also I realized more and more, no, it should just about putting them in position, and at the end I sit down on them, and that's what it is about. So I'll show you the very end. So they are now really in touch with each other. There's acoustic feedback happening, and to end the piece, I then walk to the microphone, and it looks as if I'm finally going to say something, but I just pull out the microphone and walk away, and that's the end of the piece. So that's how the chairs stay the chairs all the time during the piece, but their connection and through the sound becomes a completely different one to the setup, and also the connection between me and the chair becomes different because they are making different sounds, and I can play with them and make different sounds with them. Go to the next piece. This one is called Cheering for Others Makes You a Leader. Again, I have phones here. Next piece is last piece is without phones. This is because I also well, the last piece is without sensors, but I also use sensors without phones, actually. A piece on cheering, a piece where I just wanted to do something which was about what happens if we say hurrah, yoo-hoo, yay, our whole culture of giving up thumbs, giving applause. What do we do with that? And I chose the cheerleader, so to say, as an element for that. But it's quite a sad cheerleader, I would say. Here you see the iPhone very clearly, because as you will see already in the very beginning, it's not a cheerleader who is cheering like yeah, but it's also, I'm not at all capable of cheerleading, but it's much more about using these different gestures and taking them from how we would move like that, and also using these sounds, using hurrah, but also using applause. This was a concert for well, I wouldn't say rather conservative audience, but a somewhat older audience. And especially with these kind of audience, I found out that there's one part, for example, where I have an applause coming just from the tape, from the loudspeakers, and then I say thank you, and then again there's an applause coming, and I say thank you, and especially older audiences tend to applaud with the applause of coming from tape, but when it comes for 3 or 4 times, they realize, oh no, we shouldn't applaud with this. It is about the applause. So I use different positions to trigger sound. That there's a whole it's again playing with this, having a control interface, which is much more complicated than it has to be. It could be done. I could have played these sounds just more or less, well, just the space bar of the computer would probably not be enough, but a simple MIDI controller would be enough to play all these sounds. And I could do that and simply do that with a computer keyboard. But here I have to work quite more even than in the chair piece. I have to work quite a lot. I have to really move. There are parts in the piece to get a sound. I really have to shake my hands like this and do like this. So I'm sure that the sound, if I'm not quick and fast enough, it's not going to sound. So I build in physical effort, which does not exist for this piece to be played, but which I want to have an action connected, and an action, a bodily action connected to these sounds. But the connection is artificial, and that's also why it can change again. And what I'm interested in also to change that connection. We're going to look at a short part. Oh, this is the beginning. The camera has gone a bit weird.
Yippee! Yay! Yoo-hoo! Yee-haw! Yoo-hey! Hoorah! Hoorah! Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hey! Hoorah! Hoorah! Yee-haw! Yeah! Yee-haw! Yeah! Hoorah! Yoo-hey! Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hey! Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hey! Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hey! Hoorah! Yippee! Hoorah! Hoorah! Hoorah!
So, and then the second part here, you see more how I am triggering stuff. And here the sounds, the hurrah sound, which were at the beginning, they were quite, the way I said them, I'm natural, so to say, they become less natural due to the way I'm moving. So they transform because of what I am doing, and become a kind of more, well, short samples I trigger. So that's again a fake applause that you heard. I don't think you heard the difference, but in the first time there are some audience members. This is the very end of the piece, and here I'm really in control of the audience. I finally made it. I'm in control of them, and I can have a big audience. So I use recordings of really, well, the very end, it's really a stadium recording. of a stadium crowd in which, well, I can control then, because when I'm standing like this, they are the loudest, and then I can go down and I can get the volume softer, and then I can go up again and control the audience, so to say.
Hoera! 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 Hoera!
So there I end with a small applause after all the being in control. What I liked as a comment after that piece, that people said like, oh, it was really, it was not so nice to have to applaud, because they felt like that was not perhaps the right thing to do. So which I actually really liked. I see time is more or less over, but I'll quickly go to the last piece. Again, here a setup where in a different way, I try to connect everyday gestures or everyday action to sounds. And this is eating an apple. The piece is called In Paradisum. And with eating the apple, I control all the sounds. You see on this picture, you see the 3 microphones. You see one on the apple. Every time I take a bite, this is not amplified through the contact microphone, but the computer gets a signal, takes a bite. Every time I chew, there's a second microphone next to my ear on a chewing muscle here. And every time I chew, the computer gets a signal, she's chewing. And then there's just for amplification, you see this, well, the third microphone is amplifying just the sound of eating the apple, which is all the time there during the piece. So there's a base of normal apple sound, and all the other sounds are triggered by chewing, which changed the preset, and then biting, which changed the preset, and chewing, which then changes the sounds. I'm not gonna, so here you see the overview, so how they're different, and the whole piece are different phrases of what is happening. These are just so the position of the chew influences what sound process is done. The first chew can do something else than the fourth, and the amount of chews between 2 bites is flexible, because again here I wanted to do something for eating an apple because I thought that's really a not musical action, where I also I'm really obliged more than with the chairs. With the chairs, I can put them in a position, but I can always say like, oh, let's put it a bit closer. But with the apple, you have to swallow the apple, and I'm busy on stage a lot with eating the apple also, besides of trying to make it a musical piece where at the same time it should look as if I'm just eating an apple. I'm also busy with that. So I'll show you a short fragment. I have no idea how much you hear of the sound, but this piece you can find on YouTube and hear the whole piece correctly. And of the cheering piece, I also have a bit on my website. The chair piece, there isn't any. But here you can hear a bit of it online also. So this is the very beginning. So that's the beginning where there's slowly sound added. And the whole piece is just about taking different bites and how it slowly, it's not such a long piece, by the way, it's just 8 minutes, I think. And this is the very more, well, closer to the end. What is quite different here from if I compare it with the cheering for others makes you a leader piece is that with the cheering for others piece, I more and more get into control, and I can make, so to say, with my movements, I can make the cheers. And in the beginning, it is just one cheer, but at the end, it's a whole crowd, which I'm in control. And with this piece, I'm much more kind of discovering what there is in every bite. It's much more a research, although I do know what is in every bite. So I really can predict quite well what is coming, but sonically speaking, from how I develop the sound, it starts with really normal apple biting, and there's also the sound is also really happening on stage, which is not the case with the cheering for others piece, and then it's the whole piece is just about how every bite could sound different. So it's a bit of a piece for me also about looking for the perfect sound to eat an apple, which of course is none of at all. And so one of the things I try to do here is also to stay with eating an apple and never starting to make obviously music. Like I'm never doing like, oh yeah, I'm making music. This is fun. So I always stay with eating the apple. The action always stays there. But the sound is different, and the body movements do change a bit, but very minimal. I'm most of the time, like here, I'm turning around. That's for me the biggest action in the piece is turning around. It's always at this point I know, okay, now I'm in biting where the turning around sounds come for me. So that are 3 of my different pieces in which I am working with different kind of actions and connecting them to sounds in different ways. And that's my presentation for today. I'm very much looking forward to your questions.
Wonderful. And since this is a talk about everyday sounds, let's all open our microphones and give Cathy a round of applause for her lovely talk. Thanks to everyone who did open their microphone. I saw it wasn't unanimous, but I love the way these technologies do, I think, something that your work is doing really lovely. It's defamiliarizing everyday sounds, which I think is a fundamentally important and political thing to do. If I think to Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer's writings, I think about the way they talk about the way that as language users, we lose a connection to the event-like nature of objects, right? Or the configuration of every particular moment, right? Nothing ever repeats itself, but we experience the world as if many things repeat themselves. And I think both In Paradisum and Empty Chairs really put us in touch with that and maybe defamiliarize our experience to give us back the ways that we can aestheticize our environment and celebrate the kind of uniqueness of every moment. For me, I think the cheering for others makes you a leader seems like a very different piece, because it seems like rather than being about the everyday sounds, I mean, you could sort of think about the pom-poms and their sounds as sort of everyday sound, or even the applause. But I think that has such strong semiotic content, what applause means and does. I think rather than defamiliarize the sounds themselves, to me, it seems like that piece defamiliarizes the imperative to conform, which of course is an even more kind of political gesture. So I really love that your pieces have these kinds of political interventions. And so maybe a first question to get us rolling is how do you think about that? Do you have a goal to be transformative on your audiences? Which pieces do you think have had the greatest kind of transformative effect on the audiences you've performed them for?
Well, yeah, to have in a way, yes. I mean, I'm the kind of person who would immediately say, no, I don't have any wish to transform anybody. Everybody should do whatever they like. I'm very.
She's frozen, no?
Do whatever you like, including freezing in the middle of an answer. Yeah, we may have lost her.
Okay.
The best answer ever.
Yeah, it's like
we can all open our mics and clap some more until she comes back, or when she comes back. Hopefully, she will.
it's like we have to resuscitate Tinkerbell or something like.
And I think we have
there
her
she
back. Okay, if you could start your answer again, Cathy. We didn't catch any of it.
So no, I definitely have although I would like to say like, no, I don't have any intention to change my audience. But in a way, well, I think for me it's very important to have this position where I can use something which is outside the domain of language. So and it's not necessary that this is something I decided before, but something I discovered more and more, that the moment not only language but even concepts which I can formulate in language. So the moment I can say, like, this is what In Paradisum is about, exactly, blah, 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 and this fits in and this doesn't fit in, then I know it's wrong. Because that's how I start the piece. I start the piece with having a notebook, which is actually here, and where I write down a lot of stuff. And then the moment I start to work on it more with the sounds, I start to realize, no, it should be something where it is about something which I can just express by doing it on that. And the moment is indeed, for me, it's super important that it's really there at that moment. And that's why all the pieces, although they're composed, they are very flexible in what I can do exactly. So I can decide to make parts shorter. I can decide if I take more cues, and etc. So I want to be able to do a kind of reaction in that moment, and also to in that way also play with the audience, and to and perhaps play with is in a way also important, and at the same time to also be able, because I think certain stuff I wouldn't be able to, if I would say it with words, if I would say with cheering for others makes you a leader, if I would say, oh, cheering, how stupid, da, 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 then I was like, yeah, but then I'm not saying what I want to say, because it's also about, it is about all the difficulties with cheering, about the difficulties of applauding or not applauding, or cheering or not cheering, and how do we express our joy or our amazement, or our actually, when I made this piece, this piece was mainly done when, well, around the election of Trump. So and the crowds, I saw a lot of these crowd cheering, and I was thinking, like, wow, what's the, for every politician, because then I started to also look at different politicians and realize, oh, this is just a very normal thing to do, to cheer for a politician. I'm just not going, I would never go there and do that, but apparently, so that's what made me think about what can I do with that, and how can I make something where, well, it should be definitely an uncomfortable piece. I think that's very important. If someone would say, oh, it would be just funny, then I would think, like, well, it's allowed to be funny, but not just, then I did something wrong.
That discomfort, of course, has that transformative potential my question was trying to get at. So others, if they'd like to ask questions, I'd remind you to either put them in the chat or use the raised hand function. I don't see any raised hands quite yet. So I'm going to ask a follow-up question, but it's just a practical one for clarification related to what you just said. I'm curious about the durations of the pieces, and maybe if you ever performed them in unconventional spaces outside of concert halls.
The duration of the first piece, it's around 18 minutes. It depends a bit on how quick I am. The second piece is, I think, around 10, 11. Also depending again a bit on how quick I am. The apple is around 8. Also, again, if I take really long bites, it's gonna take really really long. Yeah, outside of well, I do performances outside of concert halls. I have some on the street performances with where I wear yellow or orange loudspeaker horns. And this one, I'm just thinking, I don't think these ones I've ever, sometimes there's some pieces I do in galleries, but I don't, well, the apple piece could be a gallery piece, but these pieces, I think they're, the empty chair, No, I don't think these pieces. So I sometimes do perform in different. I actually like quite a lot to be able to have a, so to say, a stage which is there already in a certain way. So also outside, I like to work outside or in public space. Although I also have to say that I think there are always, when I work in public space where there's, so to say, non-invited audience, or audience, I would say, who not only they're not invited, and I use that word invited on purpose, they're also, they don't expect something there. So it is really different. And then there's the invited audience, and so they come there. And what I remark is that there's always a division between the audience who expects that there's something to happen, and then the not invited audience. And then the invited audience really enjoys, one of the things they enjoy, and I think that's well, not completely, how do you say, not completely without negative aspects, is that they enjoy to see how the other people are confronted with me as a performer, so to say. So how they are kind of surprised, or they are think, what is this happening here? And because one of the reactions I get a lot after these pieces is like, oh, these people, they looked very surprised about you walking around there with yellow horns. So they kind of enjoy the reaction of the audience, who then also become performers, although they haven't been invited at all, so to say. So which makes for me always public space also difficult. Like, it still has to happen with a kind of respect for me to people who are just so. That's why when I perform in public space, I really look at like where I'm gonna do that. Where is a space? How public should it be? And when am I just kind of going into well, it's public space, so it should be accessible to everybody. And when do I not make it accessible anymore? Especially because my outside performances are quite loud, so people are often it's really disturbing in a way.
But by respect, you mean respect of the spectators towards your work?
No. Respect for the people who are not invited. So that they're not,
okay, yeah.
So no, because the I mean, they can, no, but that they are able to just do. If I'm performing outside on a place where people are doing their shopping, they just want to do their shopping, and they don't want suddenly to think like, oh, this is an art performance. Let's.
Interesting.
Quite
Okay.
different, yeah.
So, Dr. Verstrata has a hand up.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat if nobody else, maybe one of my students wants to say something, but if not, then I'll ask my question. Actually, I have two questions. I mean, let me just say that I really, really like the minimalism of your work, and that actually it usually, I mean, it has kind of an, because of the minimalism, it has maximum impact, you know, and I also see the, you know, what, you know, Chris was trying to head at towards, you know, this idea of, you know, political listening that is being triggered in all these three pieces. I'm not sure if all your work has it, but it's wonderful that you have this social commentary and all these possibilities. But it seems to me the way you talk, it's usually about affordances of objects and technologies, about cause and effect relationships. If I do this, then this will come out, and I can play with that this way. And so I do wonder, you know, now going back to that question of public, of audience, one thing I see is the gestures, and it's always a problem or also a debate, you know, how far and how much the audience should understand when you're dealing with gesture-controlled live electronics, if they should understand the system and how, you know, it's triggered and there are responses and you're playing with it, or if it doesn't really matter. So I wonder, you know, if you have thought about that, you know, because you mentioned it, but you didn't go into it. And then the second question, if I may already ask, because in my class we are now looking also at the, you know, really the basics of sound studies, and one thing that we are now dealing with is listening modes. So are you at all, when you're making notes and thinking about the work, also thinking about the specific listening perspectives that the work can trigger, and maybe playing with certain listening habits or listening regimes, maybe also undoing them? Is there also some kind of reflection going on while you're making the work, or is it just things that happen by accident, happy accidents, let's say?
Yes. So about the first question, I find it when I develop the work, I find it always very important that it also functions if people would think I'm just doing playback. So the piece should function because of the gestures and the sounds happening at that time, something which you can perceive, so to say, as long as you can see and listen. And whether you understand if there's any technology or not, I try to make it like that it would still be the work would still be there, the main thing. So and you're completely right that I talk much more about how it connects, because for me, well, that's what I said before, this layer of interpretation for my own work, it's not there. I can't do that. Also, I can't think of how do you say, evidently, with in Paradisum, well, you hear it from the title, but I can't put that into words, like not just because I don't have that level of abstraction of the piece. Or it's something like how do you, because it's yes,
it's hard to
yeah,
to have distance to your own work.
yeah. But not
Yeah.
not because it's emotionally or something, not at
No,
all.
no.
I don't have any problem with that, but it's a kind of abstract layer of what is the Apple doing that, because at the same time I know very well when I develop the piece, like when there's a problem, I know, like, this is a problem I don't want. So, and not a technical problem, it's a problem about eating the apple, having this, what are the associations I want and what not. So that's but it's something really difficult to
Yeah.
what is perhaps important to know is that these people, most of the time I don't have any program notes, or nearly no program notes, because I can't give the people like a text they should think about before they see the pieces. I don't, there are no work, and also the work texts are mostly not a lot, because so that about listening modes. Am I thinking of yes, I am thinking of listening modes in a certain way. Well, one of the things probably is I'm thinking, of course, a lot of how is the audience listening to this. Like with the apple piece in the beginning, it really has to sound for me like this is me eating the apple, even if it's not at all, because I'm amplified through often it's through the PA system, and it's quite loud. So it's evidently not at all, but ideally you really hear an apple, so that afterwards everything comes out of the apple, and you can really start with listening into the apple, and then go from there to all kind of, hopefully, association, like for me they're associations of eating the apple military, like eating the apple, being all kind of apple eating associations, which can never be really captured in a word, but are kind of, okay, this is very, so there are all kind of different characters developed by the apple eating. So at that moment it also has to open up, so it has to go from a very focused point of listening to but I don't know what kind of listening modes if it's really the theoretic. I know several.
Oh, well, I mean, from soundscape analysis, there are many modes, but I mean, actually what we were heading at towards, there's also political listening, or psychological listening, or narrative listening, or, there are all these, larger ways of listening that are more culturally embedded, which seem to be triggered in a way. I mean, for me, for instance, when I would be listening to the apple, I would definitely resort to certain metaphoric ways of listening in order to get away from the corporal sound, because I have misophonia. So I would go nuts probably listening to you eating an apple. So I need to find other mechanisms cognitively to process it and to make it okay. Yeah, but that's me. I mean, that's not every listener, of course.
Yeah, I have. I didn't know that this exists for apple eating.
Yeah, I have it usually with food. Yeah, anything food. So if you hear saliva, if you hear teeth, I will go nuts.
A friend of mine has it also, and he said when I told him about the species, he's like, "Oh, terrible."
Yeah. Okay.
And sorry, a question for Peter. Does that work? Sort of changing how you conceptualize the sound diminishes the effect of the misophonia?
I mean, it still gives me like electric shocks in my spine.
that part's already finished.
But that calms me down so that I don't kill you.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Bernd has a hand up.
Oh yeah, thank you. Very nice to listen to you, to your talks, and seeing your work. I have a question related to the things you use. So these apples or these chairs. So how do you choose them? I mean, what do they need to have that they work good with you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's not that I actually don't choose them. They come. It's also a kind of a develop with the chairs. I thought at some point, I think I want to do something with chairs, but I immediately realized no way, because there's so many good choreographies with chairs. There's such a long history of chairs in art. So I was like, I'm not gonna do something with chairs. So okay, this was a way. But then I thought, perhaps I want to do something with chairs. But I said, no, you can't do that. There's so much with chairs. There's no way you're not gonna do that. So the chairs was kind of, and I don't know, and so I just, what I do is when I have an idea, I write it down. I made that at some point I realized I have to write it down, as stupid as it is, and it stays on that list. So I have a list with many ideas of what I want to do. Sometimes it also comes from sounds, and I try to have which you probably didn't hear through this way of having sound, but the sound is at the center normally. So I really try to think, like, also with the chairs, it was very important to me, like, okay, how can I make a piece which communicates through sound, and it's not communicating just through the object chairs themselves. With the apple, to be honest, at the beginning it was a carrot. And
this changed anything. Wow, I'm leaving now. Sorry. A carrot, that's a completely different sound.
Yes, and it would also be a completely different piece, of course. But I thought of how does this is really, I would normally not tell it. I don't know why I'm telling this now, but I
you have to.
Let's be very honest. The first version of the piece, what I wrote down was like, it would be nice to make a techno piece, which is with something like eating a carrot, because you could probably make a techno piece. I thought every bite of the carrot would become another thing in the techno. I said, oh, that would be really cool. I don't make any techno, so this is where it would have gone wrong already. But then I realized at some point, no, the carrot it's not gonna work, and then I thought, oh, but an apple has that what I want to have, because the apple is super heavy with associations in history. We have in Paradise, we have Paris with Helena, we have Snow White who took a bath. So I thought, okay, now I have an object with which I can work. I thought of, I remember one of the first was a lot of apples hanging from the ceiling, and I would take bites of the apple. Well, all this, when this was all thrown away. Also the way I would work with, because I thought a very long time, I thought it needs to be something complicated. I can't just eat an apple on stage. But it turned out in the end, oh yeah, I actually, till the very few weeks before the performance, I still had a skirt which was blowing up sometimes when I was eating the apple, a very long skirt. Well, and then I realized that a few weeks before the premiere, I was like, this is wrong. It's not going to work. The skirt also. So, and that's, I have to say, in general, in my piece, I always have the feeling it gets always smaller and smaller, which I also don't like, of course, to develop it, because I always have to think like, this doesn't work. That's also the way to find for me the where it is about. And to have also all the associations, because I do then a lot of research on apples in art, apples in everyday life, history of apples, stories on apples. So there's a lot of, and then, of course, when I'm doing this research, I think like, oh, I should show all these fantastic paintings on apples, and then, or I should read the Snow White story where you hear this fantastic how she bites an apple and she's it falls down, and then I realized no, that should all go out, and so yeah, so that's how it and yeah, that's how it develops, and it just takes quite a bit of so it's not that I have an idea and then I do it. It's a very long process of going all kind of ways, and then at some point I realized, this might become a piece.
Yeah, but I want to know, how do you choose the apple or the chairs? You know, are you going to the market and you buy just a red apple or a green one or an old one or a fresh
I didn't
one?
have to tell all these honest stories. I did.
Yes. And the same question related to the chairs. I mean,
Yeah.
do you just use the chairs that are there on the location you perform, or do you take chairs with you? Do you have chairs at home? They sound different on different floors that you prefer more to use, or how is that?
Yeah, well, it depends really on the
Sorry.
Do you interview the chairs beforehand?
Yeah.
You should.
Something like the pompons I just bought and I have them with me. The chairs, I always ask the place for chairs, and I decide, because they have to be, for example, they shouldn't be clapping chairs. Sometimes they say like, oh, we have very nice chairs, you can clap them together. I say no, then I can't work. So, and they have to be quite flat at the bottom, so I always ask them for a picture, and then I say that's okay. And often they get ambitious, and they send different pictures of different kind of chairs, and we have these nice chairs and these, and then I can choose. So that's very nice. And the apple, I just go to the market to some, and I look, well, the apple, that's the, I look at what I try to look for cliche looking apples. Never a green one, actually. It's always a red with yellow is what I need. But, and I once had, luckily during a rehearsal, I once ate an apple, and then I saw like, oh, this one is rotten. So, and then you, of course, during a concert, in the rehearsal, I just thought I'd take a bit smaller bites, but during a concert, you have to choose to continue. So, but that, so it's yeah, and with the apples, I know, actually till now, all the apples, well, some of them are, of course, tasting much better than others, but they are all, sonically speaking, doesn't make much difference.
But it's about the sound, right? And not about the taste so much.
Yeah, but sonically, they're not that much different that I would say like, oh, this is really a different sound. And the chairs don't sound much. So for the chairs, it really doesn't matter. And pieces, I have, for example, a piece with music stands where it's really important how they sound, then I take my own music stands. Then there's no way someone is yeah. And with the apples sound good apparently in general. They
in your mouth. And the acoustic around.
Bernd, we still have two questions, so shall we move on to the next?
I think it was.
Thank you very much.
Very nice question, because it brings up another theme that we haven't addressed already, is the extent to which these pieces stage kind of unconventional intimacies, kind of non-dominant relationships. When you were showing all the different pictures of all the different chairs that have been involved in the piece over the sequence of your performances with them, I was kind of wondering about, which chairs you have different kinds of relationships with. But I won't ask you to address that, since we do have these other two questions. Manuel was first.
Thank you. It was actually related to Dr. Verstrate's question on misophonia, because and listening modes, because one of my experiences watching your performances was always a certain anxiety about feedback, because it's just my training in performing regular popular music, so more conventional, where anything that involves picking up sound on stage needs to be either like super protected, right? If you're singing, then the microphone has to be set up in a certain way where only your voice should be picked up, and if you have any other kind of microphone set up, then it better be really well insulated sonically. And so for me, I almost have this not innate, but a really deeply ingrained sense of protecting sound and sound spillovers, let's say, into different microphones. And for me, that was the way of listening it, almost with a type of anxiety of just like, is there going to be a little bit too much of sound sources being picked up by microphones that shouldn't? And I'm wondering if that's something that is part of your performance in preparing, but maybe also in performing itself. Is there a little bit of a, I don't know, excitement, anxiety, tension with the unpredictability of technology, perhaps?
Not so much, to be honest, because there's the only thing which can really feedback in these pieces, except the feedback at the end of the empty chairs, which is wanted, but that's also, it's not allowed feedback, because feedback you can get, of course, as soft as you want, as long if you can put a very high microphone input and then put a very large compressor. So what I do use is the technology as something you can hear and see. That's also why you see the phones on my arms. I'm not gonna hide. I could hide them as well. I could just wear something bigger and put the phone. But it's very, in that way, it's also more relating to, so to say, performance art than to music or to theater. That the technology you can see. You can also see, these are loudspeakers. They are attached to chairs, and with that loudspeakers, it's also really about bad sound on the chairs. It's about bad sound. It's not about making a good sound. The chairs are sounding bad, which is also quality in itself. But I have a feedback piece with white boards are shoved back and forward, and that's very soft. And of course, feedback is a lot in the history of feedback. It's very often that feedback is something which should not happen, first of all, evidently, but also loud. But in this piece, it's super controlled, because there's so much compression on. I use a 5-band compressor, so it's super controlled in a way, and I can also do it in many different spaces without losing control. So in a way, I mean, there's not much which can. Evidently, there's something which can go wrong, but there's not much more than what can go wrong than during a usual music performance, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Nora.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. I have a very boring question on methodology, because I've recently been dabbling in how sound evokes certain associations with us, to say simplified. So I was wondering if you also, because I have to admit I haven't read your book, so I was wondering if you've also considered methodology from psychology, for example, like implicit association tests or self-attributed association tests or projective associations tests, in order to see if there's coherence between the different associations that your participants have, and whether there's a difference in the sounds in order to create these.
Like that? No, not at all. Not because I don't think it's interesting, but because in the end, how would I say this? I think I would, the coherence, first and for all, has to be okay for me. It has to be a network of connections which is fine for me. And evidently, I'm not going. That research is very useful, but I don't think for my kind of decisions, because I think I would take the wrong decisions if I would do that. I would take the wrong. One of the reasons I think that is because of the things I realized by most of these, all these 3 pieces I've performed quite sometimes, and that I realized that sometimes after a performance I really feel like, oh, this was good, this worked good, and sometimes this was less good. And these are so small stuff. This is so small stuff. What is happening? It has so much to do with how that it's. I can't pinpoint this on what it is. And with all these psychological tests, it's much more clear what the sounds are about. So you need much clear. You can't say like, oh, we're gonna do a psychology test just on apple eating sounds. Then everybody would say like that. Okay, we can't get anything clear out of that of apple. Or you have that like some people hate it and some people like apple eating sound. And well, I think most people won't say it's a very nice sound. So no, and I definitely, it's like the same thing, or even more. And perhaps a more clear example is when I work with microphones and loudspeakers. People also ask me sometimes, like, do you work with acoustic how do you say this, formulas or something like that? And you can in a space. So where is the most resonance in the space? And I always say, no, I don't, because I'm going to listen to where I find it interesting, where it sounds. And of course, I have some knowledge of acoustics, more than from psychology, I think, but I have some knowledge. So I know a bit, like it might sound, but it's something else by trying it out. And that's one of the things I also learned from people like Alvin Lucier, who's also, he's like doing something, but with the ears. And it's taking it from science, but doing it with the ears and listening to it and making therefore, in a way, perhaps the same decisions as scientists would make, but perhaps also different ones.
Since there's a minute left, I'm gonna, I think, take the last question here. So I get bothered by the way people use the word musical as an honorific, because I think calling some musical sounds musical while saying other musical sounds are unmusical, you're othering other musical sounds as unmusical, which is problematic. I'm wondering how you think about those terms. Is there such thing as a non-musical sound? Are all the sounds you use in your work musical? What is your relationship to that word?
Oh, I'm very happy you asked this question, because this is something I forgot to say, is that I think about it a lot, because one of the things I realized that I actually need some sounds in my works where people think this is not music. And evidently now we have all learned everything can be music and everything, the sound can be music. So this doesn't exist. But that's one of the things I want people at the beginning of the chairs piece, when I'm and they hear my footsteps, to think not, oh, this is music happening, but oh, I hear her footsteps. Like when I start to eat the apple, I don't. So this is probably a shift in perception I'm really looking for. It's like, oh, she's eating an apple, and oh wait, it is about. And of course people are already thinking, because people are going to a concert, so they're not thinking, oh, she's just eating an apple on stage, this is very normal. But I want to, and so it's a kind of double. They are listening as a concert, so they have concert ears on, and then I want them to go back to, oh, but she's just eating an apple, and she's really not trying to make like, this sounds really nice, because that's a difference, if you're playing a sound where you think like, oh, let's try to make some nice sounds, you have a different kind of way of playing, a different kind of presence, and a different way of physicality also. So I want people definitely to also listen sometimes to something like, oh, this is not music, but evidently it is music. I mean, it's not about it's more using everyday sounds and putting them more back into their everyday, to be able to go back and forth between everyday. Is it music? Because I would also never really push them into music. It's never really like, if you would say that music is something defined, then I try to play a bit with the pulling them into music and pushing them out again.
And this brings another enlightening Music Matters session to a close. It was a wonderful experience to get to be introduced to your work today. Thank you so much for being here. If everyone will open their mics again and clap one more time for our speaker. That'll bring our event to a close. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for all your questions. I really enjoyed talking with you.